Good afternoon. So we are sitting in a different order, but we'll be sustainable. I can promise you that. Um, it's a very wide topic which we have. This is a very eminent panel. Very wide topic, social equity, building inclusive and sustainable communities. Now, when you say sustainable communities, you are actually trying to talk to what you are going to leave for the future and how much is the carrying capacity of the present ecosystem. These are the two things. And when it is talking about community, how as an individual you function on sustainability, how you use your water, how you deal with environment, how you feel about flora and fauna, and ultimately how you, when you integrate yourself into the community, whichever community you live in, what is your recourse and contribution to that community. I think this is the essence of this wide topic. I can tell you three brief ideas which I have to proceed on this topic, which is very wide, and we have a panel which has a very diverse background. They will bring all kind of inclusive aspects of community, sustainable community aspect. But as a country, in last 2 to 3 decades, sustainability has become much more mainstream than most of the developed country. And I'm saying it with a lot of responsibility because I have practiced environmental law. Earlier it was called only environmental law. Now it is called sustainability, climate change, climate justice. But for last 20, 25 years, we have really worked hard to create islands of excellence across the country so far as conservation, sustainability, biodiversity, wildlife is concerned. That's one aspect of sustainable culture, and that has also percolated to urban clusters. And I'm always an optimist. I always see the glass half full. So I'm taking that view that we are on the right course, whether it is plastic, whether it is river, whether we have issues with air pollution, we have issues with water wastage, we have a huge sewage issue across the country in municipal cities, but we have good examples coming up our way. So with this background, I will go to the panel, and panel you can see that each one of them brings so much of experience. So I will start with Ms. Rodrigues. What is your view about this topic? And try this.
Yeah, thanks. So we work with waste. And you know, all of us, each one as a little baby, day one, we generate waste right up to the end of our life. So waste is a critical issue that, you know, the country and the world is facing. And this is where there is also the big opportunity for us to bring about a change in system, to live values so that, you know, we can also bring about now the economy of the 21st century. And that is circular economy. But in order to enable the circular economy, there are so many different things that we will have to do collaboratively. So in waste management, when we look at you know, the systems today, which are far from inclusive, because on one hand, you have people generating the waste and, you know, very little responsibility given to those waste generators, and then the expectation that someone else will take care of the waste and, you know, the problem will disappear. So as a waste management company, and I say company because we are a business model with a very strong focus on environmental and social impact. And when we talk social impact, we talk about the large number of people working with waste, largely informal or largely people from the bottom of the pyramid. And these are people that actually do a lot of groundwork. But at the same time, today's waste management system in the context of circular economy does need professionals. So there's a whole wide spectrum of jobs that are available, but we still have to be mindful of the fact that the large number of people working with waste are working at the bottom of the pyramid, and so therefore that change needs to take place. And that's our business model, where we have revenues from waste and revenues from a service fee. Because as a generator of waste today, if we want to recover 90% of our waste or 96% of our waste, which is fully possible, then we also need to pay, like any other service, We need to pay for good waste management services, which will then also give the benefit to a better livelihood. So that's Saahas Zero Waste, the business model which has been around for now 10 years. 60% of our revenues come from a service fee, and we have about 300 people working with us across India. We provide a lot of different services: plastic waste management, bulk waste, people generating, corporate campuses and apartments are our major customers. But that's how we support communities. I mean, all of us as waste generators are part of a community, and we would enable communities to be responsible, and at the same time help the planet, help people with a better livelihood system.
Very well, initial thoughts. And historically, as rightly said, we are great waste collectors and recyclers also. If we remember, in our grandmothers used to keep those old containers for all kind of stuff, and we were not that bad. It's a very recent phenomena of last 25-30 years that the waste has become a bigger problem than it was historically. I will come to the next panelist, Mr. P.S. Narayan, and I want him to bring out more larger aspects of all the SDG goals which are part of creating sustainable communities, and how, as a responsible corporate organization, what are the new stories you are living with? Just try the other one. This is also one aspect of sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, and absolutely delighted to be part of this conversation. You know, all of us know that one of the most visible trends of recent years is this so-called adoption of ESG by companies across. And ESG incorporates what happens inside the company, what happens in the next outer circle, which is the value chain, and also what happens in the next circle, which is your communities. In some sense, this inner to outer circle represents a gradually, let's say, decreasing locus of control on what you can do and what you cannot do. Which is the reason why, if you look at, say, gender or persons with disability, initiatives around this first started within the company about 10, 15, 20 years back in many companies. And then, you know, gradually it sort of expanded to include communities outside. Now, here's the thing. When companies look at this entire spectrum, how do we look at it in a way that has a certain boundarylessness across? Let me take the example of climate change, which, you know, many companies today have goals and targets on climate change, net zero, and what have you. If you look at the entire spectrum, inside the company, when you set targets for yourself to, let's say, procure renewable energy, for example, Wipro has a target of being 100% renewable by 2030, what is the element of inclusion that you can bring in? One of the things that you can do is to look at how your renewable energy procurement is happening upstream. How responsible is it? We are, for example, part of a platform called the Forum of Responsible Energy, which looks at right from land acquisition to all the upstream processes, whether it is responsible or not, right? So you start from there, and you build it contractually into those elements of responsibility. Then you look outside the boundary of your organization. When you look at community initiatives, CSR, and so on, we are an IT services organization like LTIMindtree, and all our work is in cities, right? And we all know that one of the predominant effects of climate change in cities is what is known as the urban heat island effect. And the urban heat island effect creates multiple impacts. One of them is, it really results in heat strokes and various other kinds of health problems. Now think of certain categories of vulnerable populations, construction workers, people who work in metro sites, your app delivery workers, your Zomatos and the big baskets of the world, who are out in the sun the whole day, right? They are probably already the most affected by UHI, or the urban heat island effect. Here's a problem challenge for designers and architects. How can you design a transition shelter for our cities where workers, app delivery workers, etc., can go, can take rest for, let's say, 10, 15 minutes, can have access to clean drinking water, sanitation, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's across the spectrum view. Companies can look at that from a CSR angle.
Yes, very well said. And we need to understand that as India is, and especially a place like Bangalore, we are talking about an urban cluster. What we need is stories from the corporate world on ESG. And ESG is not any scientific thing. I tell you, we coerced one of the very important universities in India, OP Jindal University, which is based in Sonipat, New Delhi, near New Delhi, that you do a ESG report ki how much water is consumed by each student in a hostel, how much water actually flows in the wash basin, how much waste is generated by the caterers during the dinner and lunches, what is your integration with your neighboring villages, how many women and other people get employment in the university, what is their ecosystem connect, what is your flora and fauna, how many birds visit your urban cluster or your campus, and have you counted all the trees and which are the moths and butterflies which come to that area. So even a urban cluster can have a very effective ESG report. In fact, Tata has a urban forest in Andheri, Mumbai, which is worth seeing. And I remember companies after companies now coming up with small reports where one particular aspect has touched upon any of the SDG goals. So I'll come to Consulate General of Israel and I will ask you very clearly that what are some of the stories you find interesting, because Israel supports a lot of clean water initiatives in India. There are funds which work in that area. What are the examples you will like to give?
I'll give some now. Thank you, and just one thank you to BW Business World and Sudhir and Dr. Batra for organizing this event. We spoke previously, and these issues, the more we talk about them in different contexts and bringing in people from different places in India and like me from Israel, I think it continues the conversation and makes it more strong and gives, we can share best practices and ideas. And I'll just say a couple words about Israel and what we're doing with India, and afterwards I can definitely delve into it with more detail. But despite Israel being a tiny country and India being a huge country, and it looks maybe different, there are many similarities. And we started with the issue of conservation, sustainability, because we had no choice. Since Israel's inception in 1948, just a few months after India, we had a tiny, as I said, tiny land, so not a lot of actual, geographical space. We had absolutely or almost no drinking water, and we had no natural resources, and also being a young country and just starting, we couldn't bring in or import a lot. So we started basically with what is now known as circular economy and being aware of sustainability before we knew those words and concepts. We basically did it because we had no choice. We had no lakes like Bangalore. Now we're dealing with the issues of the lakes in Bangalore, but we had no beautiful lakes with good water to take from. We had to figure out what to do. And this is part of the story, and this is what we do, a lot of cooperation with India in how to conserve the water, how to clean the water, how to reuse the water. Most of the water we use now in Israel, it comes from desalination plants that we have. And now desalinated water is very expensive water, both in terms of energy and price. So we take urban wastewater and treat it and use it for agriculture. And then we use it for industrial water. Basically, we take the little that we have or that we have to pay for, which is also an interesting concept that we share in India a lot, but we reuse it as many times as we can just because it's so valuable. Same thing, we mentioned waste here. Same thing with our waste. As we're a tiny country, we have 38 places where we bury waste. So now, these days we're learning and we are using it. You can use methane and you can use it as energy hubs. Secondly, a lot of the things we throw away can be, if not properly recycled, perhaps reused. And thirdly, the land that these, ground fills are sitting on is valuable land when you don't have a lot of land. You can build new housing communities. You can bring people who are more maybe in the periphery closer to the center, and make it more accessible, which we can talk about. But what I'm trying to say here, every single thing we do, it came out of necessity. Now we're doing it, but it has ripple effects, whether on marginal communities or communities are further out. That's also sadly where we had the landfills originally, and now we have to take care, and it was mentioned as well, with different health issues that appear in different communities because just of where they live. And just one last word, and also we mentioned things starting in corporate organizations coming up. A lot of things, again in Israel, and again because of necessity, was started with the government. Government has to make the laws. They have to realize at times that there are regulations that need to be done because, certain people will take steps at times only when it's mandated by law. Not many people, and now we're realizing also the economic benefits, but not many people will take a drop in profits in order to do something good unless it's dictated. But the government also needs to know, once these regulations are in place and things happen, when to maybe take a step back, or maybe just have incentive for people who do good, but not have the negative. So it's an interesting story, which I'll be happy to discuss further.
Very well said. Yeah.
Thank you.
At this stage, I'll just tell you that just to make it more realistic, when you are talking about sustainable communities and what an individual's role is, just try to understand the situation. I'm coming from Delhi today, and some of us are from Delhi on this dais too. Delhi had this air pollution issue going on for almost 18-20 years after the CNG came also. And I'm talking about Delhi because we were the capital city of the pollution in the world, always beating the rank toppers. I filed a public interest litigation in 2015 in Delhi High Court because there were at least 16 petitions going on in Supreme Court and National Green Tribunal. And this is a very interesting thing I'm telling you. So somebody said, who will admit this petition? I said, I'm not on any environmental issue. I have filed a petition for a health emergency, and that was the word for the first time used by me. I said, I don't want to have cancer and still live in this city. How will I live? And I had data from IMA that how much cancer has increased in Delhi from 1990 to 2016-17. Court admitted that petition in Delhi High Court. It is still going on. But you know what happened in Delhi last 2 years? You think that politicians will solve these problems, even if they go and make commitments to the SDG summits and that we'll follow this, we'll do net zero by 2070. They do try, but it's not up to them. The communities have to do. And I'll give you one example. The chronic problem of Delhi was the two-wheeler. And that was a voting community, so nobody wanted to touch them. And most of the two-wheeler companies were dated technology, and nobody will touch them. So they were being cycled and used, recycled for years and decades. Standard time, 15 years, 12 years, people used to use scooters and motorcycle in Delhi. In last 3 years, 30 to 40% of those two-wheelers have been replaced by electric scooters, voluntarily, because it's cheaper, fossil fuel has become costly, it has impacted Delhi. So Delhi is much cleaner anytime you go. But that's not the real story. The real story is we did a survey and made a report through a OP Jindal University and Terry that how Haryana villages realize that they are part of the system and they cannot just burn the parali, the agriculture waste, and pollute Delhi lungs. And more than 7,000 students actually went village to village in last October to December. Haryana virtually did not burn any parali last year. It reduced 40% of the air pollution in Delhi. There is a report, but the best part, Haryana was not very keen to release that report. Nobody will take even a responsibility that mere karan pollution ho raha hai. So whatever said and done, ultimately all your answers
like Ms. Rodrigues said, all your answers will come with your direct involvement, whether you're using a straw or using all these plastic bottles. We have some glass bottles also on the table. But this all has to go to the, basically one individual. So this is how the panel is also addressing that issue. I'll come to Mindtree and I'll ask him about his stories. And I am more keen to know what can be the one eureka, one new suggestion which we can multiply and do in other part of the country. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure being here this afternoon. I represent LTIMindtree, and we are a for-profit organization, and we are bound by the law to spend our 2% on the community that we live in. But that aside, I think people who manage this and people who lead the organization are extremely passionate and are extremely concerned about the environment and the society that we live in. So therefore, I think we do fairly well in our deliverables as far as ESG is concerned. On the environment side, if I were to talk about energy the first, we do everything to ensure that we use renewable energy as much as we can. And there's new investments that are happening in the company, though it's hitting the bottom line. I think we are more concerned about the environment. So we spend a lot of money on renewable energy. We reduce the electricity that we buy from the electricity board. We have some excess energy which we wheel to the other locations too. So that is something that we use extensively. On the water, like you said, we measure what is the consumption of water per person, how much of water is wasted in the toilets, and how much is collected back after they go down the drain, and how much is recycled and then reused. So we do all that. And we also make sure that we build lots of ponds, we rejuvenate rivers, we rejuvenate wells, and we are hoping that we'll be water positive immediately. The third thing that we do very effectively is the waste management. We ensure nothing gets into the air or the water or the land. And there are several types of waste that we generate, including electronic waste, a lot being an IT company, and we ensure that they all see the end of life without being buried or put in water or burnt and pollute the air. I think you said there are people in the outer circle, so we believe that as part of our S pillar, there are people within the organization, people outside the organization, and CSR is something that takes care of people outside the organization. In the country that we live in, I've been fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know, ever since I took this responsibility of ESG, I've traveled across the country and seen interior parts of the country, which probably many of you won't have even heard the names or been there at all. And must say that, we are very fortunate being here where we are today.
Totally agree.
The kind of people that I have seen, they don't have food to eat, they don't have clothing to wear, they don't have shelter, and they are all living in places where probably even the government doesn't reach.
Right.
You are a lawyer, you can talk about the government, but I hesitate to talk about the government. But honestly speaking, these are places where nobody goes. Can you believe in one of the very developed states like Karnataka, there are places where there is no electricity even today. Right. I was in a very small village in Gujarat where we were doing an education project for children, and when I went to visit that project on how it was going and developing, I saw children without food. So obviously the model was wrong. We immediately changed it. There's no point in giving them education when they don't have basic food to eat. So whatever we do, we make sure that we go with a comprehensive solution to such places where nobody's been before and nobody goes really and nobody thinks that such people exist in such places. And we do a comprehensive solution starting from roti kapda makan, the basic, and then get into the rest like health is very important. Recently, we started a new service for people in remote areas where they don't even know what are the government schemes available. We have engaged with an organization who supports people get all the schemes that they are eligible for from the government. They coordinate that and make sure they get. So these are some of the things that we do, which are at very grassroots level, and we impact about 500,000 people.
Wow. Mr. Rao, thank you for touching that aspect, which I will go more in detail before I will actually come to Ms. Tania. The reason for people like me who are here, and I will love to travel wherever sustainability will be talked about, is that 22, 23 years back when I started going to the forest and started going to take matters from the forest to the courts, and that was the time when we used to have forest benches in the High Court, and the Supreme Court had a Friday dedicated to forest and wildlife only. I'll give you examples. Banerghata National Park in Bangalore had a CRPF firing range, and elephants used to get stray bullets here. Governments were writing to governments, nobody was removing them. We got that removed. I know examples of companies, how they collaborated with Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore and got land for elephant corridor in Chamarajnagar, Mudumalai, all this forest of 3 states, Periyar, Bandipur, Mudumalai, how that got integrated, how land was purchased with private intervention and elephants walkway were created. And most importantly, what you said, Mr. Rao, the local communities, whether it's a tribal or women, throughout the country, whichever national park, wildlife sanctuary you'll go, they are the biggest custodian of sustainable living. They are so clear about it. They don't waste water. They collect honey when they have to collect honey. They will not pick up anything from the forest. They respect the law more than anybody else. And that is the reason your forest cover, which was 9% at the time of independence, today is 17%, because the tiger survives in this country. So it's not a small achievement for a country like ours, which is a huge population issue, and urban cities can learn a lot many things if we follow what Mr. Rao said, that we go to the National Park and Wildlife Sanctuary and see what has been conserved in this country.
If I can.
Yeah, sure, please.
You know, because you talk about forests, I recently went to the Sundarbans forest in West Bengal, because we're doing a lot of plantation of mangroves there because of the floods and stuff like that, you know, which is affecting the villages. They're getting washed away. So, you know, your water body is increasing, your land is reducing in that place. And I met a gentleman there who was a poacher of tigers there. And I said to him, since he's lived with the tigers, he's been attacked about 80 times. He showed me all the wounds on his body. It was fascinating to hear stories of tiger from him. He talks about tigers like we talk about human beings, right? Believe me. And I asked him, I said to him, can you give me something of the tiger that I can take home and say I had been to Sundarbans and I met you? So he says, you can't take anything because it is illegal to take and you will be behind bars, right? And he was a poacher before who's turned protectionist now, and there are several such people who have actually transformed from being negative to the nation to being very, very positive to the nation, and really lots such people. And when we were doing plantation there, you're talking of people and community participating. All the plantation there in the Sundarban forest next to the sea is being done by locals. We just pay them a daily wage because they also need to survive, like Wilma was saying, that, you know, they all need income. We do that, and very happy to say that, you know, the place is looking lush, green, beautiful. Tigers will hopefully stay there and not come out into the villages.
Lovely. And you also remember that you are talking about places like Sundarban, which are, and you went there. I'm so happy because I had the privilege of going there 2-3 times. And you are actually in a cage. If you go there, you are in the cage. The elephant is, the tiger is free. He's hopping from island to island. He can swim in the salty water and he drinks the salty water there. So you are in a cage. You watch, if you can watch. It's very difficult. I have never sighted a tiger there. And more than the tigers, the small sharks are the worry for the local community. Because they pounce on, while you do your farming, while you do your any work, they can pounce on your leg, take a flash out, and you die in 1 minute.
Crocodiles too.
crocodiles too. And these are the communities which have not shifted. And when do they shift? When these communities actually shift, there are stories of communities shifting out of Rajaji National Park. And they were living for 100, 200, 300, 400 years. They had shifted for the purpose of saving the forest. And we are so clear that we will not give up on a small artery road or a small privilege in life. So that's why I'm sorry we are devoting so much of time on practical aspect. The reason being, these are the examples which you have in your own country. How they have sacrificed so much that you can have a better drainage system, you can have a rains on time. Sorry, Tania, on your time now.
Sure, no problem. The fact that we focused on environment and climate and forest so much, I'll bring your attention back to social equality and building sustainable communities. The focus of today's discussion. Interestingly, the marginalized community in India has a very difficult and complex interplay between what happens at the household and the macro level. When I say this, let me illustrate that with some figures and facts. IMF clearly mentions that 27% of India's GDP will increase if there is equal participation of women in the workforce. What is the status now? We are at 29.4%. Any idea about how we evolved in the last 2 decades? I joined the workforce in 2000. That gives away my age a little bit, but never mind. So in 2000, any guesses what was the women labor workforce participation? Sorry? It was 30%.
Yeah.
2023, we are sitting at 29.4%. So I'm talking about social equality and economic sustainability in urban India, which means India has been notoriously known of stagnating women labor workforce.
We just passed in parliament some law, 2029 you will get something, they are saying.
Right. So that's one aspect of it. The second marginalized community, the LGBTQ economy, is largely untapped. So we have World Bank, which clearly is mentioning that we are losing out, India is losing out on GDP worth almost $32 billion because of transphobia and homophobia. And those are the places where corporate India and organizations in the urban city can clearly do something about the employability. Yeah. The third marginalized community, I'm going to focus on just 3.
No, you should.
Talk about it. Yeah, the third one on persons with disability. So in India, we have about 2.1% of persons with disability, which accounts to what, 3 crores of persons with disability, out of which only 54% are educated. And we have CSR funds. We know what to do then. And out of this 54%, only 8% have actual qualification of graduation and above. Imagine, we are talking about poverty elevation, we are talking about economic sustainability. If we don't tackle immediate issues, social inequality issues around us, we'll find it very difficult to have India as an economic and socially progressive country. And we will talk about gender equality a little bit later, but yeah, these are the things.
But good you went on that aspect, because we will come back to it. Mr. Rodrigues, what are your thoughts? Some of the examples you will share, that who are the cheerleaders in this waste segregation, or understanding the importance of it, or good examples of community participation in this?
Yeah, so right now the regulations talk about decentralized waste management. So when you look at decentralized waste management even in a city, it means that, at ward level we will be able to do processing of wet waste and managing our dry waste. So there is where inclusion can come in, because you currently have the large informal sector, you have people who are providing these services, but it is something that the livelihood is just not dignified livelihood. So we have to recognize that. Even in Gurgaon, for instance, you have the large apartment complexes, and you see, the large apartment complexes talking about what happens to their dry waste. All of them are giving out the dry waste, but those who follow the dry waste after it goes out of their apartments, will see the quality of livelihood of waste pickers living in colonies and trying to retrieve waste. A simple service fee and mandating that they work in sheltered, proper material recovery facilities where they will have protection to work with would make so much of a difference. So that's the kind of change that we want to see. All of us right now have newspapers in our homes, and at most times we expect that whoever, the scrap dealer who's coming to our home and picking up the newspaper pays us for that waste. Now remember, when he's paying you for that waste, he is depriving his home and his livelihood and having a proper shop to be able to have his business. And those of us, middle class, really do we need that 5-10 rupees? Does it make so much of a difference to our monthly budgets? But we see that we continue with this process and believe that it's a best practice. So a lot of shift needs to be taken.
So Wipro will start a campaign that we will not ask for this money. Because these are good thoughts actually, because this is a culture issue for us.
Absolutely, that's absolutely good point. Since Wilma talked about waste, I think one of the things that Wipro does is, it's such a multi-layered problem. One of the things we do is to support social security for workers in the waste segment, right? I just want to call out two things. One is when it comes to inclusion, we all know that beyond metrics, beyond frameworks and all that, it's about mindsets. Whether it is about LGBTQ+, about women and so on, right? How your mindsets manifest in what you do, the daily lived experiences of your communities is what really makes a difference, right? On persons with disability, on children with disability, for example, if you see, one of the things we all know that cannot work, that cannot be effective, is a templatized approach. You cannot have a single template, from which you work on. There are so many different kinds of disabilities, physical, mental, and so on, each requiring a contextually different approach, maybe differing with geographies, and so on. So when companies, and a lot of companies do very good work on disability, but when they do such work, they need to put in not only money, but attention and stay for the long term. And long term here is not like your, venture or impact investing where you bring the firm up to a certain level and exit. I mean, a lot of, social sector organizations, you cannot say that, okay, now you're capable, I'm exiting. They need support all the time, right? And they need, depending on the context, different kinds of support. That's one. The second is, the long arc of social change across space and time requires, you to have that systems view of things. Yeah. For example, a lot of organizations work on maternal care for vulnerable communities, which is very good. But, maternal care for vulnerable communities can become even more effective if, as we all know, the women is educated, because that has a multi-generational cascading impact. So you invest in education, not just at a school level, but right up to the graduation level. Then that sort of conjoins together to deliver maximum impact.
Ms. Tammy, your thoughts.
Just to continue with this, education is key, and we found this, and I'll just give two short examples. One, for the issue of sustainability. In Israel, we start programs about conserving nature, not picking things up from forest or picking up even flowers, conserving water and using seat belts. In the education system, most of our schools are government-run schools, so they start from kindergarten when the child is 5, the year before they enter first grade, and they go in this way or another through the whole process. And also we found that education, exactly like you said, is also the key for bringing in marginalized or peripheral communities and also women. If women continue their education, they will go further, they will be more minded to their place in society and what they can contribute. But we tried to do it in university level because the number of women we have in engineering schools and in physics is very low. But then we found out we had to start earlier, because if a girl doesn't do maths or physics or engineering in high school, she won't be able to enter the university. And then in order for her to be on par to do it in high school and then matriculate and do the test, we have to start earlier. This is why we start these things quite early. And we see Sadly, I think we have more success with the sustainable, the water, the preserve the forest issues than at the moment with women, but we also try to take these success stories and then have these women come back to their communities and talk about what they did, be a role model, because many of these girls now have to see somebody who succeeds. If all they see is a certain type of woman or a woman who decides or was not educated who decides to say, that's fine if you decide to do that, but you also have to see that you have more options. And the more role models that we have of those who can come back and speak to girls like they were, the more impact it has than having somebody come from the outside and tell them do this or do that.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Rao, you have, how much do you think this integration of the urban corporate world with the sustainable communities at the grassroots level, whether it's the forest areas or villages, will help on many of those SDG indicators which Ms. Tania was also talking about, that we are missing out?
You know, let me share some data with you first. 5% of the Indians own 60% of the wealth. And
so end of the story of community.
Yeah, you know what? The good thing is that we are at least sitting and talking about it today. There has been a lot of activity around this. There's been a concern that's shared, but I still feel that a lot needs to be done because there's a huge disparity between those who have and those who don't have. Those who have, I think, you know, have so much that they waste their food. They have 4 or 5 houses, they can live only in one. And there are people who don't have shelter, who don't have clothing, who don't have access to education, and some have too much of access to education, even if they are not worth being educated. Now, that being the situation, I think, you know, we will take some time where we can talk that there is equality and equal opportunity and stuff like that. I think, you know, the good thing is that we are sitting here talking about it, but I don't know if each individual here and outside can take that responsibility of driving this whole initiative. I think we will one day achieve.
Yep, that is the crux actually, that what one personal thing you will do, like we have a Chief Justice of India today who is, Tania, taking most of the interest on women issues, gender issues, and a lot of laws are coming from the Supreme Court, which are, or suggestions are being given to the government. You'd like to say something?
But you know, on that, especially on what Wilma does, my experience, Wilma, is that unless the last person in your disposal chain feels that, you know, his job is important for tomorrow, things won't happen.
Absolutely.
We can segregate, we can, but you know, the guy who collects it doesn't keep it segregated, he mixes it. And then, you know, those who have to deposit it at the right place, shortcut, and then leave it elsewhere, just throw it in the vacant land available. And then, you know, they save on fuel, they save on money, they save on labor, all those things, you know, unless everybody in the society feels the same for the new generation, it's not going to happen.
Yes, Tania, what do you have to say on this? Because it's, Mr. Rao, you can give your mic. Yeah.
So let me just allude to gender equality, that one thing you said we can do. The one thing very easily we can do is sponsor education and follow that through. And for whichever vulnerable, marginalized section of the community that we believe in, because that will bring social equality. Right. Because each one of us are not doing enough. We feel that the gap is dividing, and honestly, Mr. Paneesh, I don't know how much of work the 5% will do. So the rest of us, the 95%, can actually contribute to it. Yeah. So some of the things that through CSR that NatWest Group India have been successfully doing is ensuring that we are working with NGO partners who are skilling women, young students after 12th, and they are getting ready for the professional world. So we are offering them fully paid internship, getting them ready, and 100% of them are getting absorbed in the organization, and we call it uplift. And it is not done by operations, it's actually done by the technology business of NatWest Group India, which is a harder skill to develop, and they are doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very well. I can assure the panel and the house that, and my suggestion is there that combine stories, all the stories like we had the Sundarvan story. I have one thing to tell you, Tania. There is a particular village in Haryana which is started that whenever you will have a girl child, 100 trees will be planted by the entire panchayat. And there are 4 NGOs which have taken it across Haryana now. And these are the stories which actually supplement to the anxiety which your data actually shows. So thanks a lot. We are absolutely, our time is over. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.